Again, welcome. This is our first check-in for 2023-24. And for those of you who I have not met, I'm Cammie Goucher. I am the ELD and World Languages Director for Missouri's Department of Education. And again, welcome. More personal one there. We always start with our community agreements. Turn my computer a little bit. To stay engaged, trust in the good intentions. If you have something to say, speak your truth. This is a safe zone. There may be some discomfort in some of the things we say, but bring your identity and accept a lack of closure, but I'll do my best to get us there. And I left the same quote I ended the year with: a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops. And I think that's a great thing to start our year with. Knowing that we affect what others see every day. You never know who you're influencing. So here are the things we're going to talk about today. They're all listed also in your note taker, and Julie's going to put that link in if you've joined after and don't have that link. I'll give you my welcome right now. Some WIDA updates, some DESE resources, PD opportunities that we have, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a kind of a different slant on data, because I've talked about that several times in the past. I'm going to give you some links to other presentations that we've done about using your data. I can tell you right now, nothing has changed at this point. We're still combing through several years of data to come up with new forms and new charts. Those are not quite ready yet, so I'll share that ahead of time. This comes from our blueprint for EL success. The highlighted areas are what we're going to be addressing somewhat today. These are found on the DESE webpage under this link that is at the bottom of the screen. There is a link to this slide deck in the check-in hub that is available also on the DESE website under the professional development tab. All right, oops. So here are a few WIDA updates. The first one is in regards to some webinars that they have available to everyone in the state. There is a welcome back on September 12th, and then they're going to be talking about pre-testing and access for new administrators, new coordinators, and then they have a pre-testing ordering materials. Those are all in September, and they're accessed through the secure portal. And you'll look on the secure portal page with under the webinars tab. And then they are also looking for some participants in a standards implementation study. So if you are interested in taking this survey, it takes about 25 minutes to complete. Again, the link is here on the screen, and it's regarding the new standards framework, how you feel about it. They'll ask you some questions about things you might want to see different, things they might need to add, or something that you are unclear on. That survey's due completed by October 2nd. So they're hoping that we participate. So that link is there. And then they have a new focus bulletin that just came out called Words for Science Learning. The full title is Which Words and When. And you can view that through the link that's found right here on this page. I think I also linked it in the note taker. And then just for test coordinators, they have changed the update student import file layout. And you can find out more, again, through the secure portal, or you can go to log into WIDA AMS and get some help from their online help desk. So those are some updates from WIDA. From DESE, these are some new things that we have coming up that are in the works. The DESE MEL team and I have been working on some documents that address the reading success plans and the new science of reading initiatives that are going out in our state. One of those things, I'm sure you're all curious about how you're going to address the reading success plans with English learners. So we've written some scenarios for English learners and different things that you can do to address the different needs of different students, because we all know that English learners are not all the same. So I think there are 4 scenarios that we wrote, and they'll give you an idea of what you can do and what kind of plan those students would need. We've also written a Steps to Success for English Learners, which is a companion document to the state's Step to Success for Literacy. And this deals specifically with the needs of English learners and some things that the everyday teacher should probably need to know about English learners when they're looking at literacy. And they're not all created the same. And one thing that I have heard over and over in the past year are teachers or administrators who don't know the difference between literacy learning and language learning. So this document kind of addresses that as well, making that differentiation. And then we've made several updates to the DESE ELD webpage. There's a section on masking and misclassification under the reclassification tab, that if you have a student who you found was misclassified as an English learner, ways to rectify that and address it. And then we've added an identifying, supporting, and reclassifying English learners with disabilities. It's a revised document from the one that was there before. I've sat down with special education directors and a few teachers, and we read through the document and made updates and changes, clarified some things, added a few new tables. So that's there under the ELs with Disabilities tab. And then Advancing Altella, if you have not heard of them, they are an offshoot of WIDA that is dealing specifically with alternative assessments and instruction for English learners. So they're under the Disabilities, ELs with Disabilities tab as well. And you can go to their website and find out more about what their completed study looks like, and some things that you can expect out of the new alternate assessment for English learners. So that's there. And then you'll also find under the Professional Development tab, the new self-paced e-workshops flyer. I went ahead and purchased that for our state again this year, and they've added 2 or 3 new sessions that are available this year. And so you can go there to look at that flyer. And we also have added a new EL consultant, and Cynthia Chastain has taken a different role. She's now our migrant director for the state. And Raya Morbeth is online. And Raya, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself? I'm going to minimize for a minute. Yeah. There we go. I'll give you, okay. So everybody can see Raya here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Raya. I'm the new MEL instructional specialist for Region 2 of the MEL program. And a little about me, I've worked with several migrant communities, most recently, Alaska Natives up in Alaska. Learned a lot, love it. And I'm looking forward to working with you and your EL students and your migrant students and helping you help them.
Thank you, Raya.
Yeah.
All right, let me share my screen again. So again, we have a new EL consultant for Region 2. Also, on the note taker at the very bottom, we're still looking for a few participants for the ELD and Missouri standards alignment. mostly in the secondary or the content areas. So if you know of a content area teacher who is really good with standards, excuse me, you can send them my way. Or if you're looking to help with that, please sign up on the note taker. I will check that out after we're finished. There is a stipend associated with it, so you'll get paid for the time, and it should take us probably 2 months. I've already created the format and everything. It just has to finish going through our leadership for approval. And they're kind of slow sometimes, but we are getting there. We're making progress. All right, upcoming professional development. We have some WIDA workshops that are coming up. September 18th and October 2nd is a 2-part facilitated webinar from WIDA. These are all free, no cost to you, but they are limited to 40 participants. The first one is bringing language into focus, expectations, functions, and features. And this is furthering one of the offerings that was on the self-paced learning and going the step beyond on how to use the new standards framework for building those expectations, functions, and features. Lori Hanna, if you remember her from in the past in Missouri, is going to be the facilitator for that from WIDA. So I hope that all of you are able to join in on that, or 40 of you at least. You sign up for that through the website, the DESE website on the curriculum calendar. So you will sign up there with the sign up link. And then after the cut date, which I think was September the 10th, roundabout. After you've signed up there, I send the names into WIDA, and then WIDA will send you an email with all of the login information. And you can go ahead and start looking at that before the sessions actually start. So again, that's September 18th and October 2nd. Then October 1st through 6th is Interface. If you've ever attended Interface before, I encourage you to do so. We will have some EL sessions there at Interface this year. Julie and I are going to do a science session. Then on October 23rd and 30th, there is another 2-part facilitated webinar from WIDA. Again, this one's free, and again, it's limited to 40 participants. This one is on expanding reading instruction with multilingual learners, and it goes into the content areas and how to work with content teachers and work with ELs to improve their reading instruction. Okay, so those are upcoming professional development. In addition, we have our monthly check-ins, and you can find those in the ELD webpage again under professional development. And then each month we've already gone ahead and given you the topics that we're going to be discussing. This time we're talking about EL basics and something about data. And then next month we're going to be talking about the path to graduation for ELs, the schedules and needed coursework. I am working with our counseling department to come up with a new identifying graduating ELs who are SLIFE and newcomers. So getting them enrolled and how you go about looking at their transcripts and all of that. And that's kind of what we're going to delve into next month, getting ready for looking at their schedules and getting them ready for graduation. So that's coming up. Then October is going to be one of those self-facilitated workshops during our time. It was the only thing that was available. So that would be this 23rd, the reading one. Starts on our October check-in time. And then the next month, Rhonda Hittenberg-Ortiz from our Springfield RPDC is going to talk to us about multilingual learners and special ed process. Then, as always, we have no December meeting. We're allowing you to enjoy your holidays, have a break. Then January will be about grading and retention as we start looking at retaining students. February will be talking about long-term English learners and helping them develop a love for learning. March will be refugees and SLIFE students. And then April, we're going to bring in some CTE folks and talk about CTE as an alternative pathway for English learners and some goals for success that they can have through that. And then hopefully by May, we'll have information on the 3-year cycle and those new charts available. So that's our goal. So that gives you an idea of what we're looking for in the coming year. All right, these next couple of slides are just some questions that I've gotten recently as the year has started. One of them that's come up several times is referring to vaccinations with refugees and immigrants. So on the screen here are just some of the rules for immunizations. Most refugees, when they are processed, receive any vaccinations that they need at that time. So they would not need any further vaccinations. They should have record of that when they enter your schools. And then immigrants, if they come and they are considered homeless, immediately upon enrollment, they should be enrolled immediately, and they don't have to have their vaccinations with them on enrollment. They will be in process and finding out what they need and what they don't, but they can be enrolled immediately. So that's something that some people were not aware of. And then at the bottom of the screen is the link to the immunization school requirements if you need that information. So that will take you to more in-depth information about immunizations. The next question that I've been getting a lot this year is having to do with transcripts, whether they have transcripts and we don't know how to use them, or whether or not they come with no transcripts, and what do we do in that case? So if they do have transcripts, there are some links on our ELD webpage under the Identification, Placement, and Scheduling tab that are really good for how to look at your transcripts. Then there is an ICAP some ICAP information also on that page. And this document linked here will take you to this limited students with limited or interrupted formal education, and gives you a little bit of an idea of how you can work through enrolling them and setting up their classwork. And then, excuse me, as I scroll at the back, it gives you some sample ideas for setting up courses for the students. It gives you a 4-year plan, a 3-year plan, and a 5-year plan, depending on how much time they have when they enroll. And it gives you an idea of what to do to help them get enrolled in classes and get on that path to graduation. That's one of the documents we're working to update. So, but for now, that one is there and has really good information for you. There's also this switchboard. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but they work primarily with immigrants and refugees. And there are some really good documents on their website as well. And this one is that I've linked here is Enrolling Refugee Children in U.S. Schools. And it gives you several tips and tricks that you can use to help you with the process. And then students without transcripts, this is one of the things we're going to be working on in the new document I'm working with the counselors to develop. And as a sneak peek preview, this is one of the things that we've been working to develop, kind of an educational background survey for the counselors to sit down with the students to look through. Some of the basic questions are a lot like the language use survey, but will give the counselor an idea of how to approach scheduling them for classes. This we adapted from the New York Department of Education, who deals a lot with refugee and immigrant students. So they were a very good resource. Some questions and answers there. And then, look, that got kind of moved down a little bit. Some former schooling information. And then this is a secondary math assessment that they had developed that I added as well. So if you have a newcomer that comes in and you don't know where to place them in secondary math classes, this gives you kind of a wide variety to get an idea of where they are standing as far as their math abilities. So that's just kind of a sneak peek at one of the things we're working on, this educational background survey. And then there are some new publications and resources from the Department of Education. One of the new resources, they just put out a new video that goes along with it, is this family toolkit that gives some resources and links for families who have children who are learning English. And then this is very interesting. It is about the EL educators in America and the availability, projected need, and some teacher preparation questions that you may have. So it's a very nice infographic that kind of gives you an idea of where we are in our nation and what we need to move towards. And then last but not least, they have a brand new newcomer kit from the Department of Education that is been updated with new information, has some really good resources in there as well. So I invite you to take a look at that. All right, today's information. So it's going to be fairly short because I want to give you some time for, I know you have some questions that you'd like to try to have answered today. So I'm going to provide you with some time for that at the end. But for today, we're going to look at some information that will maybe be new, some that might be a review, and I'm going to try to challenge you of what you currently think or know. So the big ideas for today, why using data is important, and a little bit about mitigating some of the biases that we may have. And then the big thing that we're going to talk about is how we move from using intuition to deliberation, rethinking some of our decision rules and making time and taking time, that problem-solving process, and then discussing training and support that is necessary. So one thing we know is that not all data are created equal. We may have something that has kind of a Mediterranean flair of all kinds of mixes of flavors that go good together. Or some of us may have that sweet tooth and have a different one. One's not better than the other, but they are definitely different in their reasonings and what they provide for us. And that's kind of how we are with our data. A lot of times we're focusing on data-based decision-making when it's really the data-based decision implementing that we need to focus on. And that's what I'm seeing a lot. I've been saying for years that we need to use our data to make decisions, but we also need to take those decisions and implement them. And that's what I want to challenge you about this year. So our decisions could be good or bad, but it's how we implement them that matters. Another thing that I want to point out is that each point on those data points is a student. So we need to keep that in mind when we're making our decisions. It isn't just data, it's students that we're talking about. Okay, so here's a problem for you. This is just to get you thinking, finding out what kind of a decision maker you are. So I have 3 problems that I'm going to ask you to solve. These are math problems. So first one, I'm going to let you read it. See if you can figure out the answer. Jot it down on a piece of paper beside you or something. We have a bat and a ball that cost $1.10 in total. The bat cost $1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost? Jot down an answer. Give you a few seconds to figure that one out. And there's a purpose to this. Okay. Next question. If it takes 5 machines 5 minutes to make 5 widgets, How long would it take 100 machines to make 100 widgets? Write down an answer. Okay, I'm going to go on to question 3. This one's a little bit more wordy. In a lake, there's a patch of lily pads. Every day, the patch doubles in size. If it takes 48 days for that patch to cover the entire lake, how long would it take for the patch to cover half of the lake? Go to the next screen, it has, whoops, all 3. Okay, does anyone want to offer an answer to number 1? I'll let you put it in the chat. If you would, put in the chat, but you think the answer to number 1 is. No one's brave. Okay. Got one answer. All right. No answers. Okay, let's look at number 2. If it takes 5 minutes to do 5 widgets on 5 machines, how long will it take to do 100 machines to make 100 widgets? How many minutes? Got 5 minutes. Anyone else? I hope you wrote these down. You don't have to share, but I hope you wrote them down. All right, last question. Whoops. In a lake, there's a patch of lily pads. Every day it doubles. If it takes 48 days to fill the whole patch, how much does it take to fill half the lake? Good job, Elizabeth. Good job. All right. So I'm gonna escape. I'm gonna show my, let's see here. Oop. There we go. I want to get the answers below here. So in my notes. So the typical answers are 10 cents, 100 minutes, and 24 days. Those are all wrong. So most people, that's what they answer. So if you answered those, that's incorrect. The correct answers are 5 cents, 5 minutes, and 47 days. The purpose of this activity is to measure a person's ability or disposition to reflect on a question and resist reporting their first response that comes to their mind. So if you have a high IQ and you got 0 of these right, most often people who have high IQs and get 0 correct often have dyscalculia, which is, I thought, interesting. And women are more likely to get 0 of these correct, and men are more likely to get them all correct. And math anxiety and mathematical reasoning ability account for some of the differences on whether you get these right or wrong. And if you're interested, at the bottom, it tells you how they're calculated if you calculate them, if you take the time to work them out. The first one is the only one that I struggled with, and I got the other 2 right, like some of you did right off. But this solution comes from some autism research that's done. The reason I share this is, I'll go back to my edited view here. So the reason for this, 83% of the people get at least one question wrong. 33% get all three wrong. 52% of students from MIT get at least one wrong. And this is a cognitive reflection test. As I said, it tells whether or not you go with your first instinct, whether it's intuition versus deliberation that you're using. 33% of the people who take this test use intuition, and only about 17% deliberate on an answer. This is another one you've probably seen that is the same concept. When you look at this, which line appears to be longer? Oops. Hang on. Hang on a minute. Go from here. All right. So when you're looking at that, which one appears to be longer? If you take away the ends of the arrows, you can see they're both exactly the same length. But intuition is deceiving, because when you look at it, one of them does look like it's a longer line, but it's just on how it looks on the outside. So there was another study that was done where they took some scenarios and gave them to a group of teachers. And they gave each one of these is the same student. They just changed the name or the description of the student in the scenario. So Jacob is supposed to be a Caucasian white boy, Demetrius would be a black boy, and Carlos a Latino. All they did was change the name on the very same scenario and gave it to the group of teachers to evaluate whether or not they would refer this student to as having a learning disability, emotional or behavior disorder, or talented or gifted student. Okay, so these descriptions, again, were the same student in every case, but for learning disabilities, they referred the student who was white much more often than the Black or Latino student. And again, it's the same student, they just changed the name on the document. With emotional behavior disorders, they referred the Black student much more often than the white or the Latino, and the Latino more than the white. Again, they were the same student on all three studies. And then for gifted and talented, again, they referred the white student much more often than the Black or Latino, even though it was the same description for all three students. So again, what kind of judgment are we using to evaluate these students? Something we need to keep in mind. And most students are referred, who are referred between 73 and 90% are found eligible if they are in that category by each category. So for learning disabilities, more often the white students are found eligible or referred. And for emotional disorders, more often the Black students are referred. For talented and gifted, more often the white students are referred. And so they found that in every study that they had done. Thought that was interesting. As far as gifted, this is another thing that we're going to be working on in the near future. We don't represent our gifted students enough in our student population. Only about 2% of the total population of ELs, where research shows about 10% of the population is gifted. And that's based on national data. So they did a review of 6 studies on the identification process of gifted ELs, and it reflected that teachers may not even consider an EL as gifted because of the language characteristics, and they just see them as having deficits rather than looking at their assets. And so there are some suggestions or recommendations that they make that They need to acknowledge the giftedness. There needs to be a shift from the deficit to the asset base. Legislation needs to be created to mandate services for gifted learners. There needs to be more research, of course. That standardized testing needs to be identified and made sufficient for English learners that's free of cultural bias. And that we need to use multiple measures and alternative assessments to give that whole picture for our students. Things we all know and can appreciate. Again, multiple measures have to be implemented. So if you have a gifted student, that test that they use to test all of the other students for giftedness may not be the right one for our English learners. We have to have other tools in our tool belt that we can use. And we have some documents. Next month, our director of the gifted programs is going to come and speak to us a little bit about gifted if she's able. So I wanted to share that. So one reason is that our ability to reason is flawed. We have all these biases that we bring to the table, even if we don't know that we have them. We have biases that we're not even aware of. And so we have to be ready to acknowledge those and address them. This comes from the decisionlab.com. If you want to read more about each of these kinds of biases, I thought it was fascinating. You can tell what I did over the summer. So I did a lot of reading this summer. One or two that I picked out: confirmation bias and available heuristics. Confirmation bias, we're more likely to believe and to remember information that confirms our own views rather than information that disagrees with it, whether or not it's accurate. So if something makes us feel like, hey, yeah, that's how I feel, that's what I thought too, and you find something that affirms that, you're more likely to believe it, even if it's less accurate. And the other one says we're biased against information that's more readily available. So if there's a lot of research done about it and it's right there in our faces, a lot of times we disregard that because there's so much of it that says that. So there must be something else we need to look at. I thought that was interesting. But our reasoning is sometimes flawed because of our biases. More confidence does not make it more likely to be correct. So when someone is declaring something and they're telling you how strongly and how confident they are that that's the right answer, it doesn't mean that it's true. Something to keep in mind. The job of our decision makers isn't to be right, but to figure out the odds in any decision and play them well. So think about when we're predicting the weather. Being deliberate and using data and evidence increases the odds of making a better decision, but it doesn't guarantee that it's success. Our weather predictors can predict the weather, but we all know it isn't always correct, even though they use the science and the best methods to do so. So there's always a chance that it won't be successful. So I want you to pause for a moment and reflect. Is there anything that I've said so far that resonates with you, that gives you reason to go, I know that, or yes, I've seen that? So if you want to add something in the chat that kind of resonates with you. Anything give you pause to think? Exactly, Farah. We need to be aware of our biases, or bring some awareness about what biases exist. Yeah. That's great. I agree. Sometimes our lenses do get clouded by everything. I totally agree. All right, so something to think about when we're talking with others, when we're talking to content teachers, making them aware of some of the biases that are out there without maybe calling them out, just sharing the different kinds of biases, it might be helpful. All right, so how do we move from using our intuition to being deliberate in our decision making? So the first way is to use data and evidence that are guided by decision rules in our decision making. Then the second is to schedule and prioritize time for data-based decision making as a team. And then the third way is to train and support our teams to use data collaboratively to make decisions together. So we're going to talk first about improving our decision making. This one just kind of made me laugh. It says the Uber driver in the car, he says that the app told him to go down the stairs. So he did. I mean, let's improve our decision making. So when we're making improved decisions, we use high quality decision rules. We use high quality progress monitoring assessments, and we collect enough data as we go along. So the first one, we use high quality decision rules. When do we determine whether our intervention or our program is or is not working? We could use a data point rule, and that's what a lot of us use. We plot the data points our students to show their gains and whether they're making progress, and plot our goal. That's one way. And we say that when they get we look at the last 4 or 5 consecutive data points and see if they're above or below the goal line. Or in this case, we would continue doing what we're doing because the students are staying fairly consistent. The next kind is the trend line rule. When the trend line is less steep than the goal line. So there's our trend line. So we've looked at our data and we've developed a trend. We make a change. So this student has a lot of points below the line. They're not really having enough progress. So we need to make a change. Or we can use the median rule. And when the median of the last 3 data points is below the goal line, then we make a change. Research says that it's best to use the median or the trend line opposed to the data point rule. And you can see they would say continue doing what you're doing, but the trend and the median say, no, you're not being as successful as you could be. Let's change a few things. Okay. With WIDA, we have access, or you have access to our trends and our data. This is a picture of the secure portal. At the bottom down here in the right, you'll see a button that says Data Dashboard, and it gives you these options. You can have demographic data, you can have proficiency level data, you can have percentile growth, and it also gives you NAEP performance data. The proficiency reports can go within a trend. You've got 2nd, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade that it reports out, and you can pick which proficiency level that you want. This is for our state data. It doesn't get down to the district level, unfortunately. But you do get your district report that you can plot on this. Excuse me, this tells you the state trends. It also gives you a percentile growth report, which you can use to plot your students to show where they are in relation to the state if you wanted to create those data points in the trend data or the median data. And this gives you the percentile ranges as well. So I wanted to make sure you're aware of where that is and that it's available for you to use. And we've shared this in the past. Thank you to Tracy Rutherford for this graphic. But let's see, in the May 2022 ELD Check-In, We shared out how to figure this information and how to use it, and I gave you all kinds of charts. These are the types of things we need to be looking at every year to see where our students are. Do this for each domain level so that you know where they are in each domain. Do it for just one individual student or do it for your group of students. There's also a presentation called the ELD Data Story that walks you through this and the 3-year growth model. So we've talked about this before. We need to be using this to inform our decisions and be deliberate about finding this information, but we also have to implement it. That's where we're kind of falling short. We need to use high quality progress monitoring assessments in between. So there's a lot of discussion now about the reading assessments that are going on and how we should use them for our English learners. They're good tools. The 4 that we've selected for the state all have been normed for English learners. They all even have a Spanish component if you wanted to purchase them so that you could test the students for Spanish proficiency. Unfortunately, it doesn't have all of the languages that we have in our state, but at least we have Spanish. But even after the beginning, after the students get past newcomer status, those assessments are going to give you some valuable information on what skills our students have. Other documents or other assessments that you may have, whether they're commercially available or user created, are going to give you information that should guide your instruction. So we need to use that, but we need to make sure that it is high quality and that is prepared and used appropriately. So we need to decide if it's for screening, progress monitoring, or diagnostic reasons. Is it reliable? Is it valid? Any assessment that you purchase, has it been tested with your population of students? Has it been normed with English learners? That's one of the questions that I ask people all the time when they're talking about gifted student assessments or special ed assessments. Have they been normed for English learners? And then the last one, do they test what they actually say they're testing? So that's one of the things we have to make sure. So make sure you use a high quality assessment and then make sure you're collecting enough data. So if you're thinking about exiting a student, you need to start now collecting data. If you have a student who's a 3.5 or above, they may be getting to the point where they're nearing testing out of the ESL program. This is when you start collecting data to make that decision. You don't wait till the end of the year when they've scored even closer and say, well, they're almost there. I think that they did a good job all year. And I want to go ahead and exit them. Now, how would I do that? That's not when we do this. We need to start now and collect these points all along. To make recommendations from research, they say you need to have at least 12 to 14 weeks of intervention before you make a decision. You should collect at least 8 or more data points at the minimum. And you have to have at least one observation collected each week for at least 10 to 12 weeks before you make decisions on whether you move on, whether it's working, or whether you need to make a change. The more data points we have is the more confidence, our confidence band is increasing. So that reduces the impact of bad days and good days the students having, whether it was an easy passage or hard, whether it was interesting to them or not, or if there may have been distractions that day. So collecting more data helps us have more points of reference when we're making decisions. And the kinds of data points that we should be collecting are progress monitoring that answers, are they making progress towards proficiency? Curriculum embedded assessments that tell us whether or not they're learning the skills we're teaching. And then student perception is also really important. Does the student feel like it's being helpful to them? And are there some consequences? Are they learning something wrong, or is there something that's confusing to them? So we need their view as well to help us make those decisions. We should also do to determine if it's effective or not, we also need to do a program review, and we need to have a meeting. And that's the reason we do a 3-year cycle, but every 3 months you should be reviewing whether what you're doing right now is working. So in a 3-month cycle, take a look at where you are and where the student is, so that we're not just making those decisions at the end of the year. So how do we move from intuition to deliberation? We just talked about the evidence. The next thing is time for data-based decision-making as a team. Deliberation takes time, and when your time is limited, that's when we rely on our intuition. So we go by our gut feelings, but we need time to really look at the data and make informed decisions. So we're not just devoting all of our energy to trying to quickly solve it. Rather, we're trying to figure it out and figure out what we should do next. So the problem-solving process starts with identifying the problem. Is our instruction having the expected impact? Then analyzing the problem. Why is whatever is keeping them back happening? Develop a plan. What are we going to do about it? And then plan, implementation, and evaluation. How do we implement this? And then afterwards, did it work? And if it didn't, what is happening that needs to be changed? We start the cycle again until we come up with a solution. Another thing I wanted to bring out is, when are you making your decisions about students? Is it before school, during school, or after school? We tend to make poor decisions when we're feeling stressed or tired or have decision fatigue. So you need to plan your time for meeting when you're not feeling that stressed out, tired, or fatigued. But for teachers, that's pretty much all the time. So I guess we shouldn't make any decisions, right? But find your best time when you're less stressed or less tired or less fatigued, and you'll make better decisions. And also, we need to make them as a team, because man by himself is fallible, but men together or women together are less so. So as a team, we make fewer errors when we're talking and making decisions on something important. The last thing is train and support your team on data evaluation. So we need to work with our teachers, whoever's on our team, to discuss the why. Why are we using the data, and what are our decision rules? And why are we using these rules? How are we collecting the data, and how are we conducting efficient meetings on that data? And what is our screening? What is our diagnostic? And what progress monitoring? What does it mean? So we need to explain this to teachers and work with them to understand it. Go over your access scores with teachers. Tell them look at what the scores are as a team and make those decisions. So what patterns and trends are we seeing across domains? If I were looking at this case of students here, these are second graders, and I look down the listening, they all do fairly well except for this newcomer, and he's going to need some extra support. They do really well with listening, so I don't need to stand in front of the class and lecture to them. I don't need to have them sitting and listening to me giving them information. But when I look at speaking, all of their scores are fairly low in speaking. I need to give them more opportunities to speak, and I need to develop lessons where they're speaking more. Reading, there are a couple of high readers, but the rest are pretty low or intermediate. I need to do some reading intervention with these students. And writing is all in the intermediate level, so I need to provide them with some reading or writing instruction. So this tells me where I need to go. Oral language is a big need. Literacy is a big need. Comprehension's not too bad for most of them. And if I work on the areas where they have the greatest need and find out about them, that gives me a goal and an approach that we can take as a team. And when you do that and you know the how, the what, and the why, then your scores are going to increase more rapidly. So it takes planning. I suggest planning out professional development that you can offer as an ELD team to your staff, and start with the train the leaders first, your principals, your administrators. Make sure that they understand the process and what's going on. And then after they have that understanding, work together to train the staff so that everyone understands what's going on. So we need to focus less on making the right decisions, more on making the best decisions. And the best decisions we can make for students are those that are based on the best evidence available, and where everyone is committed as a team to implementing them well. And implementing them is a big task because it takes everyone being involved and committing to the process. These are some resources that were used in developing this information. So if you wanted to find out more about it, I recommend any of these books. They're very informational. And you can always reach out to your MEL people for more help. They can help you with developing your program or looking at your data and processing it. And now's your turn. I'm done talking, and I'm gonna let you ask some of those burning questions I know you might have from the beginning of the school year. So I'm going to I'm gonna share this. Whoops. Didn't want to do that. I want to share this link and put it in the chat. We still do this every month. If you will fill out that, but then I'm going to minimize. And I wanted to remind you, today's and past recordings will be found on the hub, which is on the professional development page. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you ask some questions to see if I have any answers.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we were talking about that long-term ELs
Yes.
who have been born and brought up and 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, still not getting that. So what I have seen, like I know that the portfolio, you have to get started in the beginning. So by end, you have enough evidence to make sure. So I have been telling my teachers, but somehow it didn't work. So this year, I'm really going to get it, like what you said, administrators to understand so they enforce it, because without the principals enforcing, mostly teachers are not there. But my question was, do we have to give them instruction every day, knowing that the language is not the one which is their motivation? They're not motivated to take an access test again. So do we need to give them instruction every day, or we can monitor them like once and twice and with the portfolio that they think the classwork and keeping the grades okay, all those kind of things? What do you say?
So a lot of times with the long-term learners like that, if you see that they are getting close to proficiency, but there's still skills, a lot of times because they were learning the language, there were skills they missed out on. So if you can identify some of those skills, again, if you look at your access data, is going to tell you which areas they have the most weakness, target that area and just work on the specific area of need. And then, yes, you don't have to see them every day. You could maybe see them once or twice a week, or push in their classroom and work on specific skills within the lessons they're doing in the classroom.
Yeah, because what I saw when I compared, I always compare like last 3 and 4 years of access scoring, and they were going up, but somehow they are going down after pandemic and going down and down. So they had those skills mastered, and in the classroom they're doing like in the classroom test and all, they do almost okay. Not, I can't say that best, but access. They just don't want to come because they think we don't have to come to ESL classes and take this access every year. So that is the, I can see the motivational issue more than needing the skill. So I don't know how about the rest of the districts are, if they are noticing the same kind of trend or not.
Sometimes it's just, you need to vary the approach that you use with them, do something a little bit different with them. And what I've found is our long-term English learners are often those students who we quit seeing. So they get to a level 3 and you stop giving them services, or you back off on their services. And so they no longer have the support. And as I said, they missed some skills while they were learning English, and now they have English, but they don't have those skills they missed. So we kind of work on those skills that are lacking and bringing those. And that's part of our job as well, to make sure that they're caught up on some of the content maybe that they missed, provide some of that remediation. It might not be us, it may be something for RTI. So if we can identify the skills, if it's not a language skill any longer, then it needs to be addressed by someone else. But helping to, again, working as a team to help identify those skills and having a process in place for working on those skills. That makes sense?
Yes. And I think that's what it's lacking. The skill, not the language. So collaboration with the classroom teachers and pushing in more to make sure this extra support is there. Okay, you answered my question. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I would like you to speak a little bit more about how we should address administration, like from the district level, et cetera. We are talking much more about English learners, but how we integrate that into the MTSS system. What should we be saying? What are some key things? I mean, I have some ideas, but I really would like some key things to say to administrators as to how the English program is, because we are tier 1 instruction, but we also do interventions. And it's really hard for them sometimes to wrap their head around that.
Right. I was looking to see if Rob is still here. He's really good. Yeah, there he is. Rob, you want to talk about that? I know you're really into multi-tiered.
Geez, I don't know. So Sandra, are you talking about like, I mean, I think even with the woman who was speaking before you, Sandra, I start to think about the need to meet the level of language needed to meet a grade level standard. And so helping, so as far as tier 1 instruction, really understanding like, so the new framework is talking about this is the language that students would need to meet a grade level standard. And it's not just for English learners to meet that grade level standard, but for all students to meet the grade level standard. And so to talk about language expectation, having a language focus in a content unit during tier 1 instruction, and talking about we need to be more explicit about what language we want students to be using when they're showing their understanding of the content. And we can use things like the WIDA framework to kind of pick what are sort of linguistic resources that students really need to know, and not just our English learners again, but all students. And I mean, I guess, you know, for the tier 1, spinning it a little bit as it's essential for our multilingual learners, but all of our students will boost their achievement when we're talking about, you know, when we're effectively integrating language and content. I mean, I don't know, Sandra, I don't even know if that was helpful.
No, that's exactly the kinds of things I've said, but I've had to give them the caveat. Oh, okay, our teachers are going to do this. You do know your teachers have not had the training to do this.
Yeah.
And that EL stuff is in the index of a book often, or it's this little aside. It's not integrating language into the content area instruction. And so I'm like, you're expecting teachers to be able to do this, and they don't have the training and they don't have the curricular materials. So we're pushing each other back and forth. Well, then how? And I said, well, we need to all get on the ball, because I don't even think that we're even having we're having a similar conversation, okay? We have a construction going on here, but when we're talking sometimes with administrators, they walk away and they think, oh, they'll just do these Kagan strategies or something, and I'm going,
Right.
yeah. So the level of, you know, training and time for teachers to implement, and then also that buy-in of it takes time, but the payoff is good. If you just skipped over it, it's like you didn't even teach it.
Mhm.
And so it's a tough one to have to just say that, and then they go, okay, where do I start? So I gave them places to start, but
I mean, and maybe I'm making it, hi, it's Allison Bowman. Maybe I'm making it too simple, but like, I don't know, I just think of it as like regular tier 1 teaching, and like, how are you doing whatever task you've asked them to do? I mean, that's language incorporation no matter what. I mean, are you asking them to talk about it? I mean, that's speaking. Are you asking them to write about it? You know, I mean, that's the written side of things. I mean, obviously I understand it's a very simplified version, but ultimately, I mean, teachers do this all the time. They just don't necessarily recognize that they do it at the most simplistic level, if that makes sense. I mean, we're all incorporating language, and it's just simply how we're doing it and getting them to understand, like, okay, well, you want them to complete such and such task. How are they going to do it? What domain are they going to use in order to do that?
Right.
And as far like when you say like, oh, they'll just do some Kagan strategies, like, to me that's like someone not having seen a really good example of integrated instruction. So if you could have, if within U City, if there's really good co-teaching going on, or some good co-planning where you've designed a lesson where you're being really explicit about what are our language objectives, what are our content objectives, again, like Allison saying, what domain are we intentionally creating opportunities for practice? I think the example non-example is effective. So if I can see like, oh, this lesson, I can tell that all students in this classroom were not only working on, you know, high school level history, but we're also really focused on these language structures. Maybe moving it towards, this is the type of lesson we're trying to create in all classrooms. I don't know. Maybe. I lost my train of thought, so I'm gonna stop.
So I've been trying, well, you guys were talking, I was trying to look for a MTSS webinar that I attended this summer that was put on by Illuminate Education. That was really good. So I'm going to share that link in the chat. It might have some helpful information for you. That's why I was letting Rob talk so I could look. Because I know he knows his stuff when it comes to MTSS.
Well, or at least I'll fill up some time with talking. So.
Well, no, but I trusted what you have to say. But this goes into like tier 1, and then the language and literacy development of English learners. And it was a lot to do. We've been doing so much research lately on literacy and English learners. So I have several resources that kind of talk to that. But I felt like this was a good resource that might give you some information that will be helpful.
Tammy,
Yes,
I know that you've talked to me about this already, but could you tell the group a little bit about reading success plans and English learners? And my understanding, most English learners do get a reading success plan if they're reading below grade level, or
so yeah, so
what's your general spiel about that?
okay, the new legislation that came down says that every student in Missouri, if they qualify, they have a SRD, significant reading deficit, must have a reading success plan. There's no getting around that. But there is a sentence in the legislation that says that when we're looking at this statement more closely, let me pull it up here real quick so I say it properly. It says, a substantial reading deficiency shall refer to a student who is one or more grade level or levels behind in reading or reading readiness, provided that nothing in this section shall be interpreted to prevent a school district or charter school from offering a reading success plan to any student based on an assessment completed at the start and end of the school year. So when we read that, our interpretation was like our non-English speakers, that would be a reason that could be interpreted to prevent the school or charter from offering a reading success plan to those students because they don't have the language to complete the assessment, or if they have a severe cognitive delay. That might be a reason to prevent a school from offering a reading success plan to those students. So that's the approach we're going towards for those severe or for students who have no English yet. It's unfair to give them that assessment and give them a plan if they don't have language. However, our stance, we've created, as I said, scenarios to address different types of situations. For example, if an English learner comes from another country and they are very fluent in their home language, we don't need to give them a reading success plan. They already know how to read. They just don't know how to read in English. So the support that they need is going to be primarily achieved through their ELD classrooms. So they'll take the assessment, and that assessment is going to show that there's a need. But on the reading success plan, there's a place at the top where you're going to identify them as a student with that's ESL or special ed. You can circle that. If they're identified as special ed, we're going to put notes in the details for their goals. Like this student is fluent in their home language and really doesn't need a reading success plan. Their needs are going to be addressed through ELD. So we're going to document that's how we're serving their needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have a reading deficiency. They just need more English support. Does that make sense? And then we'll also have those students who come with deficiencies in their home language and reading. They will need some support. And once we get past the newcomer stage, those reading assessments, as I was talking about earlier, are going to tell us the areas that they're weak. It may help us identify which letter sounds they don't know in English that aren't familiar because they're not in their home language. So it's going to help us identify areas we can work on, and it's up to ELD specialists to kind of say, yes, this is a language deficiency. This is a language need that we are addressing. Again, that teamwork. So it's going to be us working with the literacy team to say, yes, we'll work on these language goals. Maybe we need to work on their oral language proficiency before they're going to be successful in phonetics or phonics, because they have to have that basis. And we'll work on these sounds that aren't present in their language to help them improve their English so that they can do better on the literacy assessment. Does that make sense? So it's going to be a joint process with language goals paired with reading literacy goals on the reading success plan. So in a way, it's going to be a married IAP and RSP. So there'll be both goals on there. So it shouldn't be more for you. It should be the things that we're already working on when we're working with those students to get their language developed and more proficient. But we're just weaving in some literacy because one of our goals is reading. So we've got reading, listening, speaking, and writing. Those are all part of literacy, but we're looking at it through the language lens where they're looking at it more through the literacy lens and we're seeing the two different sides of it they have to have the language before they can develop the literacy.
Tammy, I know we have the document that's come out and everything, but how are we going to get this information
How are we going to get it out?
out so that it becomes implemented? And I feel like top down is important, and also reading coaches, those kinds of things.
Right,
But I think that's our biggest challenge at this
right,
moment, is to get that understanding out. I'm with you, but some of the
Right.
questions they're going to ask are things like, when is the newcomer able
Well,
to take this
right. The step
When-
one is
yeah,
we're going to share this with the reading consultants. And
okay,
so we're going to hopefully get them to where they have that understanding so that that's available through the RPDCs. This document that we've created will be available on the website. Our Mel people hopefully will be able to go out and do some training with this.
I'm hoping so.
Yes, I will be available. We'll discuss it through this forum and through others. So we have
And
some
I think
push it out.
part of my concern is that that sometimes some of the districts have selected to train their own.
Right.
And so how are we going to get this message to, if they're not being trained by those literacy consultants?
Right.
How's this message gonna?
So we're also presenting this at federal programs, so that'll
Okay.
be available to administrators there.
Mhm.
They've pushed out the literacy portion at the administrators meeting, but we also have future administrator meetings, and we will share it then with administrators so that they're aware.
So,
As many avenues as we can get it out, and then again sharing it with this group so that they're aware and they know what's being implemented and what's out there for you to have access to. So sometimes we have to be our own advocates as well.
right, right. Well, we need to go out and shake the trees, I think. so.
We do, yes. Any other questions?
Tammy, can I ask a question? This is Tracy.
Yes, Tracy.
I'm already getting a lot of questions from reading coaches because they've already begun beginning of the year testing, and they want to know, do I test this kid? Do I test this kid in Spanish? Do I test this kid in English? And then they also have questions then about, who implements the plan for all the ELs on the caseload to write reading plans for them. That should be coming from the reading coaches, I would assume. Yes. Okay.
Well, so kind of what I was just saying, it needs to be, when it comes to your English learners, it needs to be a team approach. So bring the team in, so that you can say, hey, this student can read in their home language. They're fluent reading in Spanish. They really don't need a reading success plan, but on your plan, because they didn't pass this test, let's put some language goals that will support their getting to where they need to be to better pass the test, basically, so that they have the language skills that will enable them to do better on this assessment. Again, it's out of our hands because legislation says that it has to be given to all students, but we're trying to work with the system to make it a better approach. As far as who's responsible, again, it should be a joint process, and it shouldn't be given to the ESL teacher and say, okay, these are your kids, you teach them reading, because we are not reading instructors, but we can help support the reading instruction, and we can help support by saying yes or no, they need a reading portion in their plan, or identifying those ones that are proficient at reading in their home language. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So all students, even a newcomer, an immigrant newcomer student, still will take the assessment.
And
The
so
reading
from that paragraph I read a while ago, we're trying to see if we can hold off on the newcomers who cannot even read or don't know any English. And I think that we may have a valid argument. This is was kind of an epiphany that we were sitting and reading through this the other day. And I said, you know what, that sentence right there kind of makes, maybe we don't have to test our newcomers or are severely cognitively disabled. So that's the discussion we're having right now, and hopefully we'll have that clarification in the next week or so that we can share out when this document's ready.
They started testing
Okay.
today in our district, so it already happened.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Tammy, could you tell where that's listed? Because in the bill itself, that statement's not there, or at least not that I can find. So I don't, is that in the guidance from DESE, or is that?
no, hang on just a minute. Let me see if I can pull it up and I'll share it.
And when I emailed DESE last week, the literacy office, I was told, yes, newcomers had to be tested.
Well,
and so we proceeded with testing them, even though.
and right now that's how we stand, but
Okay.
like I say, we've gotten so many calls in the last week, we really kind of looked more deeply into what the guidance says. Let me see if I can find it. It's probably in my recent. It may take me a little bit, but let's see, I think it's this one. I've had so much stuff go across my desk this last week. It's like I pulled up many things.
I definitely could see in the RSP guidance how the team could decide that they don't need an RSP. But like I said, I just was confused because the vendor is sending the data directly to the state. And so they said they would flag any student that didn't have data.
So they're going to send us an overall report. Most of the information is going to be at the district level. Your district's going to get the information, and your district's going to create your reading success plans. We're not going to sit and look at every student, I can tell you.
No, I don't.
Not enough of us to do that, so.
Yeah, not on the reading success plan, but the data from the vendor, they said that those scores, the Lexile scores would be sent.
Yes, we'll get an overall report that we'll use. But as long as you're taking care of it at the local level and you can justify what you've done and how you're serving the students, I don't think that anyone's going to question. Yeah, your beginning of the year and end of the year assessment, where you're taking the information, even if your students are taking and they are not proficient, that's going to give you baseline data, and hopefully we're going to show gain by the end of the year anyway, and that's what they're looking for. I am not seeing the document right offhand. Let me see here. Any other questions while I'm looking?
This is a completely unrelated to this topic question. I couldn't find in your notes information about signing up for the ELD and the content information that you mentioned on the DESE updates, that you were still looking for people.
Oh, it's at the very end of the note taker. It's at the bottom.
Okay.
If you scroll on down towards the bottom.
I put I put the note taker back on too, so
Thank you, ma'am.
didn't have it.
This is me.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Kramer, and I am new to my position and new to this. But I'm just wondering if you have any school districts that are rural that don't have as high as a occurrence rate that that have good examples of just beginning and starting up like an EL program from scratch. Because that's kind of the situation that I'm in. And I've worked with Rhea, she's been really helpful, but I'm just wondering if you know of any that are rural that maybe I could pick their brain.
That have a similar population.
Yeah.
So there is a map on the DESE ELD webpage. Have you seen
Okay.
that? Let me see, I'll share this real quick. So I'm not finding what I was looking for. Okay. So here on the DESE webpage, it says map showing percentage of EL learners in districts.
Oh, okay.
It'll open it for me. Sometimes it blocks me. But it takes you to a, there you go. It takes you to a Google map, and on the side, it gives you the percentage of ELs, and then the number of ELs in the district. So that might help you find someone with a similar percentage and number as your district. And then if you click on it, it gives you contact information of how you can get a hold of that school.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
You're very welcome. And then I'll go back and stop sharing, go back to looking for that document. I may have to find it and send it to you. I'll include it. I'll cut and paste it onto our note taker when I find it. Trying to find things when you really want them is hard. Let's see here. There are 163 messages.
It's okay, Cami. I just, like I said, I went back as you were reading that and was reading the Senate bill, and it doesn't say anything in there on this actual bill.
There
And
are
so
two.
I was trying to figure out where it was at.
There are two different bills, so it may be on the other. Anyway, I'll tell you what, I will find it and put it in the note taker. So check back on the note taker in the next day or so, and I'll make sure it's posted there when I find it. Okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Because I copied it directly from the legislative bill. But now that I'm trying to find it quickly, I won't. Any other questions? I don't want to keep you guys all night. Oh, I found it. Okay. I'm gonna have to read some more. I think it's in the dyslexia, that portion of the mandate, but again, I will find it
Yes.
and post it.
Yeah, and we do, yeah, I do know in the dyslexia part, it does say that, but I just didn't think it was in the reading assessment piece.
Yeah.
I would love for it to be.
Yeah.
Cause I'm with you. I don't think that they need to. Yes.
Right. I think that's expecting a lot, but we don't write the laws. And sometimes the people who write the laws do not have an educational background, so we just have to try ways to implement them.
You bet, and
fairly
I
and
appreciate you
equitably.
guys, yeah, I appreciate you guys lobbying up there for us with Desi and trying to, think through the lens of our newcomers.
Exactly, and that was the whole reason for us writing that companion document. Because it's going to be hard for our English learners to meet some of those expectations. And hard for our EL teachers to try to keep up with all of that.
One more question, Cammie, have you already put the companion document on the DESI website yet?
No, we want to read through it with the consultants first and get their eyes on it. And then after we've gone through it with them, then we'll go through the final editing and then post it.
Okay, just curious about that. Thanks.
Yeah. We got one more vetting to do and then it'll be released. It's like everything, there's a process involved before we can actually share things out. Everything has a process. Any other questions? And again, this is, I will stop recording. So if you want to ask without being recorded.